Long live the spirit of Comrade Kathrada, long live. Program Director, Comrade Derek Hanekom. Let's set the record straight. I never served as Comrade, or rather as Deputy to President Mbeki. I was a minister with a portfolio in his cabinet. Thank you. Thank you very much. Comrade Barbara Hogan and the Kathrada family, the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, the Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, the Premier of Gauteng, David Makura, members of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, led by the SG, Comrade Kgalema Motlanthe, members of the South African Communist Party Central Committee, led by Comrade Zimande, members of the Central Executive Committee of COSATU, led by General Secretary Pekin Chalinchali, honorable members of Parliament here present, distinguished guests, our religious leaders, Isitwala Ndwe, Comrade Andrew Mlangeni, Isitwala Ndwe Seaparankwe, Comrade Dennis Goldbeck, and all other veterans present here, Amakala, Ano, Nkanchobovu. Comrades and friends, ladies and gentlemen, fellow South Africans, on a day like this, we should not mince words. We should say it like it is. We are pained, gutted, saddened, and sorrowful. We are a nation in mourning. Isitwala Ndwe Seaparankwe Ahmed Kathrada, one of our most revered national leaders, has shuffled off this mortal coil. Therefore, let me express our deepest condolences to Comrade Barbara Hogan and the Kathrada family, as well as his comrades and friends. Today is the day on which we close the eyes of Comrade Ahmed Kathrada permanently, because during his lifetime he opened ours forever and saved us from the blindness of our hearts. Along with countless men and women of a higher order of consciousness with whom he cast his lot in pursuance of deep ideals, Comrade Kathy helped unleash human possibilities. Warts and all, post-apartheid South Africa is an attestation of such human possibility Comrade Kathy and his generation and those before him dared to imagine. In this subversive act of opening our eyes, he made us believe in our inherent ability to create a totally new social reality. Driven by these ideals, derived from the human fellowship, his subversive cast of mind succeeded in heralding a vision for a state of being that would redefine human imagination, not only on the southern tip of the continent of Africa, but on a global scale. The anti-apartheid struggle redefined the very notion of being human, challenging the idea of racial hierarchy historically steeped in the ethos of European Enlightenment. Against the excesses of European self-consciousness that defined itself normatively and the rest as the other, Comrade Kathy and a legion of his comrades refused to conform to this imposed norm and therefore canonized the historical period in which they lived. On a scale of history, this was indeed reimagining human possibilities. Comrade Kathy never doubted for a moment, even during his 26 years behind bars, that this shared historical imagination would generate a new order of being for the downtrodden masses reeling under a racist yoke. His frame of vision, which invested his being with elevated meaning, may very well have been articulated by the poet Henry van Dyke's imperishable words that, and I quote, "There is a loftier ambition than merely to stand high in the world. It is to stoop down and lift mankind a little higher," close quote. After snatching Nelson Mandela and many others of his generation before him, the unaccountable hand of mortality has struck once again, snuffing out the life of one of our own, and in the process leaving us all poorer for it. When mortality asserts itself, it does so without due regard to human emotion. Those wedded to the African metaphysics would be forgiven for attributing Comrade Kathy's departure to otherworldly conspiracy among those of his comrades who have predeceased him and for whom existence in the other dimension could not continue without him among their number. Those revolutionaries who have transitioned to the ages include Dr. Abdurrahman, Sol Plaatje, Lillian Goy, Bram Fischer, Helen Joseph, Dula Umar, Nelson Mandela, Kada Asmal, Walter Sisulu, Harold Wolpe, Oliver Reginald Tambo, Elias Mutwaledi, Arthur Goldreich, Joe Slovo, Moses Kotane, Monty Naika, Moses Mabida, Amina Kachalia, Ruth Fest, Ahmed Timol, Raymond Mhlaba, J.B. Marx, Gavin Mbeki, Yusuf Dadu, Solomon Mahlangu, and many more others. All these revolutionaries shared a common vision with him, a vision steeped in a transcendent notion of human possibility. It may very well be that they felt incomplete without the diligence of Comrade Kathy, his contagious banter, his humility, and his ability to exude human fellowship. After 87 years of exemplary life, Comrade Kathy has succumbed to mortality, as did all these comrades before him, as will all of us when our hour strikes. And so it is that during moments like this, the fragility of the human condition whips up feelings of hate, sorrow, grief, and pain in all of us whom he leaves behind. Yet, we may choose to look at things on the brighter side. If we did, we would realize that such a life as that of Comrade Kathrada is worth celebrating. A sense of fortitude would counsel to offset the pain of his mortality with the immortality of his legacy. What he and his political organization, the African National Congress, stood for has forever enriched human experience. I would say we should take comfort from the immortality of the idea that defined his social existence, the idea of freedom. While in one fell swoop, mortality has blown off his life, his vision will always remain etched in historical memory. Each day of the enjoyment of freedom for all of us is the ultimate expression of gratitude to Comrade Kathy and all those who, like him, fought to a standstill against human oppression articulated in the discourse of racialization. His legacy finds voluble expression in the centrality of the idea that his life radiated, the idea that we have the ability to create a new form of life. A new form of life anchored on unity, democracy, non-racialism, non-sexism, and justice. These principles, which Comrade Kathy lived for all his life, were not just hollow statements. They are foundational to a new form of life. It would be disingenuous to pay tribute to the life of Comrade Ahmed Kathrada and pretend that he was not deeply disturbed by the kind of apartheid failure of politics. In this regard, we do not put words into his mouth post facto or posthumously, since, true to his consistent principles, he penned a public letter to the President of our country in which he gave vent to his views about the state of the state in which our nation finds itself. In parts, his letter reads as follows, and I quote, "I have always maintained the position of not speaking out publicly about any difference I may have against my leaders It is a position that requires the respect of all South Africans, which of course must be earned at all times. Comrade Kathy continues, and bluntly, if not arrogantly, in the face of such persistently widespread criticism, condemnation, and demand, is it asking too much to express the hope that you will choose the correct way that is gaining momentum to consider stepping down?" Close quote. Amandla. "354 days ago today, Comrade Kathrada wrote this letter to which a reply had not been forthcoming. As you are aware, his letter went without any formal reply. I've quoted Comrade Kathy at length in this regard to make the point that for better or for worse, what he stood for never changed according to the fluidities of history. He held on to the immutable laws of history insofar as they were prescriptive of what is most desirable for human life. Comrade Kathy took exception to the current culture of feeding frenzy, moral corruption, societal depravity, political dissolution, the gross and sleaze enveloping human mind that would put to shame even some of the vilest political orders known to human history. He found current South African political leadership wanting on many fronts that he mentions in his letter, and could not hesitate to call for the resignation of the president of the country, with whom the buck stops. Once again, here is to the human possibility. Just when a dispassionate observer would have thought the ravages of age have deprived him of his trademark intellectual vitality, Comrade Kathy let rip in this vintage moral mode. Yet he remained forever measured, a towering moral icon who would not compromise with anything outside the framework of superior human values. In this connection, he was once again reaffirming the courage, humility, selflessness, and generosity of freedom fighters within the cultural framework of self-reflection. Indeed, the measure of self-reflection is needed if human civilization is to endure. The ANC itself may disappear off the face of the earth if it fails to embrace the culture of self-reflection from time to time concerning its character and inner soul as a governing party. Comrade Kathy himself deemed a critique of current democratic government a precondition to the sustenance of our democracy. For him, the mainsprings of a cultural, political, and philosophical practice of truth-telling, being honest, expressive, and unambiguous in public discourse. Self-reflection means a process of subjective becoming by consciously grappling with objective reality. The process of self-reflection makes and remakes our subjectivity. Self-reflection amounts to questioning the very basis of the underlying postulates that frame the way we do things. Without self-reflection, human beings degenerate into a depersonalized state of parrotry, conformity, and robotics. In equal measure, Comrade Kathy was troubled by the noxious climate of racism consuming the soul of our nation. He established the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation with the central tenet of fighting the monster of racism, driven by the understanding that the onset of April 27, 1994 did not mark the social end of racist practices. It is worth noting that Comrade Ahmed Kathrada remained politically engaged with the challenges of his time to the very last minute of his life. He never tired nor let the fragility of old age stand in the way. He was a redoubtable, diligent, and passionate activist for social change and justice, the very metaphor for human agency. How then do we conclude a requiem to a life so well lived? Perhaps Horatius, The officer of the Roman Empire expressed our current historical experience better when he penned his ode, and I quote, "Happy is the man, and happy he alone, he who can call today his own, he who secure within can say, tomorrow do thy worst, for I have lived today," close quote. And I thank you for your attention.